Welcome to the deep dive. Get ready to explore, well, a really fascinating intersection today. Neuroanatomy, technology, and how we can make really complex stuff understandable.
hmm We're diving into brain mapping, specifically looking at a source about a tool called Seizure Zone, interactive brain mapping for neurological understanding.
Seizure Zone.
Yeah, and it offers this pretty unique way to visualize the connections between specific bits of the brain and, the functions or symptoms they might link up with.
Right, so think of this deep dive as your guided tour through the text describing Seizure Zone. Our mission basically is to unpack what this interactive tool is, how it does its thing, and the genuinely surprising, I think, insightful connections it helps visualize.
Connections between different parts of your brain and specific experiences or actions, sometimes quite unexpected ones, that you might see in a neurological context.
Exactly. And we'll stick strictly to what the source material tells us about it.
Right. Exploring how Seizure Zone aims to empower users, you, the listener, to build a deeper understanding of neuroanatomy and how it relates to neurological stuff, using this interactive visualization as the main key.
And that's the hook, isn't it? The part that makes this, I think, both critical and fun. It's how Seizure Zone takes something incredibly complex, like the human brain and, its potential issues, and makes it visually concrete.
hmm
It's about seeing how something that feels maybe abstract, like a particular symptom, say, a strange feeling or sudden movement, could potentially be tied to a very specific spot inside your head.
It's kind of a shortcut to grasping brain localization, but in a really engaging way, right? Without getting totally bogged down in dense medical terms.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll look at specific examples the source gives that really bring this idea to life.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What is Seizure Zone, based just on the text we have? Fundamentally, the source describes it as an interactive 3D brain visualization tool.
Interactive 3D model. Okay, that already sounds way more engaging than just looking at flat pictures in a textbook.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the core purpose isn't just to show you a static image. It's about letting you actively engage with a three-dimensional representation of the brain.
Okay.
The source really emphasizes its primary goal to empower users, to give them a deeper understanding of neuroanatomy and, crucially, its connection to neurological functions and symptoms.
And who are they trying to empower here? Who's it actually built for?
According to the source, it's designed with students in mind, educators too, and really anyone who's just curious about the brain. Curious minds.
So, lowering the barrier to entry for neuroscience.
That seems to be the idea. Provide an accessible platform, something engaging that helps people explore these complexities. Instead of just passively reading, you can actively manipulate and look around the brain model.
Turning learning into exploration, basically.
Exactly. The central concept is this visualization. It lets you see the different brain regions, the big ones we hear about. The frontal lobe, temporal, parietal, occipital.
The major players.
Right, and it helps you understand their general roles. Like the source mentions the frontal lobe's linked to executive functions, planning, making decisions, controlling impulses, that kind of higher level stuff. Or the temporal lobe being critical for processing sounds, auditory information, and also forming memories.
Okay, so it shows the big areas and what they generally do. But how does it connect that to symptoms, to conditions? That seems like the key step.
Yeah, this is where it gets more specific. The source explicitly says the tool links these brain regions to neurological conditions, and it specifically calls out epilepsy.
Epilepsy. Okay, that makes sense as a focus.
It really does, because epilepsy often involves, abnormal electrical activity that's quite localized in the brain. And the symptoms that result, the seizure semiologies, can be really clear, sometimes dramatic, examples of how messing with a specific brain area leads to observable effects.
So Seizure Zone visualizes a region and then shows how that specific area might be involved in causing certain neurological experiences, like symptoms linked to epileptic activity.
Exactly. It's about mapping the potential location of that dysfunction onto the actual physical brain structure. It connects what happens to where it might be happening.
Got it. It's not just a static map. It shows potential activity and its consequences. So how does this visualization actually happen? What's the tech underneath it all that makes Seizure Zone work, according to the source?
Okay, let's get into the technical side described in the source. The foundation is this 3D brain model. And it's not just some generic model. It's based on a widely recognized scientific standard, the Destrieux Atlas.
Destrieux Atlas, like a map for the brain.
Pretty much. Think of how a geographical atlas divides the world into countries, states, cities. A brain atlas, like Destrieux, carves up the brain into many distinct regions based on anatomical landmarks. It gives neuroscientists a standard way to talk about specific areas.
So they're using a scientifically validated map as the base. That's important.
Absolutely. And using an atlas like this lets the tool go beyond just showing the big lobes, frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital. The source notes, it visualizes those, yes, but it also renders much more specific structures. The gyri.
Bridges, the folds on the surface.
Exactly, the prominent folds. And the sulci, those are the grooves or valleys in between the folds. These smaller details are really crucial for understanding precise localization within the lobes.
So it's a highly detailed 3D map, right down to the individual bumps and grooves. Okay, how does a user actually interact with this
Big
map
lobes,
to
frontal,
link it up with
parietal.
symptoms?
The source describes a pretty straightforward interaction flow. The main way you explore it is by picking from a list of predefined semiology examples.
Semiology examples. So semiology is about signs and symptoms, right?
Correct. It's the medical term for studying signs and symptoms.
Yeah.
So in Seizure Zone, a semiology example isn't just one symptom in isolation. It usually represents a specific set of symptoms or clinical signs that often occur together, or that tend to point towards a particular brain area being involved.
Okay, so you pick a kind of symptom profile from a menu. What happens then?
Well, according to the source, this is where the tool's magic comes in. When you select an example from that list, the brain regions thought to be implicated or involved with that specific set of symptoms get highlighted right there on the 3D model.
Ah, okay. So you click, and the relevant part of the brain just lights up, essentially.
Yeah, it visually responds by changing its appearance on the model. That instant visual feedback, seeing the area highlight.
That must be incredibly helpful for learning. Really makes it stick.
It seems like it would be. And the source adds that alongside that dynamic highlighting, you also get a detailed description of the semiology you selected.
Ah, okay.
So you get the visual map, the highlighted brain bit, and a text explanation of the symptoms and their clinical context. It's got a multimodal approach, hitting both visual and textual learning.
Nice. The source also gives us a peek under the hood, right? At the rendering tech.
It does. It specifies that the 3D rendering is powered by the 3.js library.
3JS. Yeah, I've heard of that. It's for web-based 3D graphics.
Exactly. It's a very popular and powerful JavaScript library for doing just that, creating and showing 3D graphics right inside a standard web browser. This is a pretty significant choice, technically,
Why is that?
because it means the tool is widely accessible. You don't need specialized software. You don't need a super powerful computer. If you have a reasonably modern web browser, you should be able to use it.
Making that accessibility goal practical through the tech choice. Smart.
Absolutely. The source also mentions the underlying geometric data for the brain model is loaded using OBJ files. That's a common format for 3D shapes.
Okay.
And these files are organized and referenced through something called the JSON configuration file. Think of it like an index that tells the 3.js engine how to put together and display all the different parts of the brain model correctly.
And they use a clever visual trick, too, don't they, to make the highlights really pop?
They do. The source mentions a specific rendering technique.
Yeah.
The main overall brain model is rendered with some transparency.
Ah, so it's sort of see-through.
Yeah, a bit translucent. And this isn't just for looks. It serves a really important functional purpose. By making the main brain structure partly transparent, the highlighted regions, the areas linked to the symptoms you picked, can stand out much more clearly.
Right, otherwise they might get hidden if they're deep inside or on the other side of the model.
Precisely. The transparency helps ensure that the implicated areas are distinctly visible against the backdrop of the whole brain. It makes the key information easier to see.
That's smart design, making sure the information is the visual focus. Okay, so we've covered how it works. Now for the really interesting part, the what. What specific symptom-to-brain connections can we actually learn about from this? The source gives some pretty compelling examples, those semiologies.
Yeah, this is where that critical and fun idea really comes into play, I think. Seizure Zone presents these specific symptom sets, the semiologies, and then visually links them to the potential brain areas involved based on, established clinical understanding. And the source provides one really vivid example where it gives us both the symptoms and the specific potential brain region.
And that one is, let me see, a sense of déjà vu combined with repetitive lip-smacking movements. Okay, that's vernal. That's a combination. Déjà vu feels so internal, subjective, and lip-smacking is this outward physical thing.
It does seem like an unusual pairing if you're not familiar with seizure types, yeah. But according to the source material and the tools data, this specific combination, that feeling of déjà vu happening alongside those automatic lip-smacking movements, potentially indicates involvement of the temporal lobe.
The temporal lobe again, which we said earlier is involved in memory and hearing.
Correct. And the source actually drills down even further. It specifies which parts of the temporal lobe might be involved. The inferior and middle temporal gyri.
Inferior and middle temporal gyri. So specific ridges or folds within the temporal lobe structure itself.
Exactly.
Wow. So that feeling, that uncanny sense of I've been here before, coupled with an automatic action like lip smacking, can potentially be traced back to activity in these very specific folds on the side and underside of your temporal lobe.
That's what the tool visualizes based on the data it uses.
That connection is just fascinating. It makes the whole abstract idea of brain localization incredibly concrete, doesn't it? It's almost like finding the street address in the brain for a specific feeling and action combo.
It really is. And this example perfectly illustrates the power the source suggests a tool like Seizure Zone has. You'd select déjà vu and lip smacking from the list. The transparent 3D brain model pops up, and then boom, those specific gyri within the temporal lobe light up clearly.
Yeah.
It transforms a, maybe dry clinical description into something you can see, an anatomical reality. And it sparks curiosity, right? Why would these two seemingly different things be linked to the same spot?
Totally. It makes you wonder how memory, perception, maybe even automatic motor stuff might all be packed together in that region.
It really gives you that visual aha moment, or aims to. Now, the source also lists several other semiology examples, but it's important to note, for these other ones, the text provided doesn't explicitly tell us the linked brain region.
Okay, that's a key distinction based on just the source text we're looking at. What are some of those other examples?
They're quite diverse, covering a real range of potential seizure symptoms, things like visual hallucinations coupled with fear, muscle stiffening, and arm jerks.
Okay, more motor related.
Right. Then auditory hallucinations along with head turning, sudden loss of vision combined with numbness, just numbness, but specifically in the face and hand together.
Sensory focus there.
Yeah. Also, difficulty in speech production, so language issues, impaired coordination and balance, and even things like emotional instability mixed with autonomic dysfunction, like changes in heart rate or sweating.
Wow, that list covers a huge range. Sensory stuff, motor stuff, language, coordination, even emotions and basic body functions.
It really does. And again, while the source text itself doesn't list the specific brain areas for these, the earlier description of how the tool works tells us what would happen if you picked one.
Right. Based on the mechanism, selecting any of these examples
Would cause the relevant implicated brain regions to light up on the 3D model.
Yeah.
And you get that detailed description alongside it.
Okay, so these other examples demonstrate the breadth of symptoms the tool covers. It reinforces that it provides this symptom-to-location mapping across many different kinds of neurological events, even if we only got the specific anatomical link written out for that one déjà vu example from this source.
Exactly. It shows the tool's intended function as a kind of broad visual dictionary for seizure-related symptoms and their potential brain origins. Each one is an entry point to explore the brain's geography of function and, well, potential dysfunction.
You learn the process of mapping symptoms to regions, which seems to be the core educational goal here.
Precisely.
Now, this is clearly presented as a powerful learning tool aimed at making complex neuroscience understandable. But the source also includes a really vital section on its educational purpose and, crucially, a disclaimer. This feels important.
Extremely important. This part cannot be emphasized enough.
Yeah.
The source is absolutely crystal clear about how this tool is intended to be used. It states it's strictly for educational and informational purposes. Full stop.
It's a teaching aid, basically.
Yes, it serves as a visual aid. Nothing more, nothing less in a medical context. Its stated goal is to foster understanding, spark curiosity about brain anatomy, physiology, and how these relate to neurological conditions, again, explicitly mentioning epilepsy as the main clinical backdrop.
Right.
The developers seem to believe strongly that interactive learning, like what this tool offers, is just a better way to grasp complex subjects like the brain.
Okay, that's the purpose. And then there's the crucial disclaimer, which the source highlights pretty prominently.
Yes, and it's spelled out in bold, very clear terms. It leaves absolutely no room for misunderstanding. It says, the information and visualizations provided by Seizure Zone are not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
Okay, so point blank. Do not use this to figure out what's wrong with you or someone else.
Absolutely not. It goes on. This tool should not be used to make any healthcare decisions. And the final critical instruction, if you have any medical concerns or conditions, please consult a qualified healthcare professional without delay.
This really ties into the critical part of our critical and fun theme for this dive, doesn't it? It's fascinating. It's fun in an educational sense to see these connections visually.
But understanding the absolute limitations is the critical piece.
Yeah.
Self-diagnosing based on an educational tool like this would be inappropriate and, frankly, potentially harmful.
Right. So learning that, say, déjà vu and lip smacking are sometimes linked to the temporal lobe via this tool is a great educational moment. It visualizes a concept, but it's worlds away from a doctor evaluating those actual symptoms in a real person with their unique history, their full medical picture, using proper diagnostic tests.
Precisely. Brains vary between people. A generalized anatomical model, like the one based on the Destrieux Atlas, even though it's a scientific standard, doesn't capture your individual brain structure or situation. Real medical diagnosis is a much deeper, multifaceted process.
So this tool is like a conceptual guide, a starting point for understanding how brain regions can relate to symptoms in general.
Exactly that. It's for building general knowledge, sparking curiosity, maybe helping students visualize concepts. It is absolutely not for personal medical guidance. That prominent disclaimer is essential for responsible education in this space.
It really underscores that difference between learning general principles and applying knowledge in a specific medical situation, which needs professional expertise. Okay, shifting gears slightly, the source also tells us a bit about where Seizure Zone came from. It links it to a project called Bionic Chaos.
Yes, that's right. Seizure Zone is presented as an initiative of the Bionic Chaos Project.
Bionic Chaos, interesting name.
Hmm.
Sort of biology meets complexity, chaos. What's their overall mission, according to the source?
The source describes their mission as exploring the intersections of biology, technology, and art.
Biology, technology, and art. That's quite a mix. How do those three fit together in what they're doing?
Well, their stated goal is to create innovative educational tools and also to raise awareness about complex scientific and medical topics. The source specifically highlights their focus on demystifying neuroscience and conditions like epilepsy.
Okay, so using tech and maybe art or design to make complicated science and medicine easier to grasp.
That seems to be the core idea. Leveraging technology's power, perhaps combined with the creative or communicative approaches from art and design, to make these subjects more understandable and engaging for a wider audience.
Right, and Seizure Zone fits that description perfectly then.
It really does. It's a direct example of that mission in action. It uses technology, the 3D visualization with 3.js, maybe the AI assistance for the descriptions we'll get to educate about biology, the neuroanatomy, the physiology behind the symptoms and medical topics specifically, the context of epilepsy semiology.
And the art part could be in the visualization itself, the design choices.
You could definitely argue that. The visual design, the interactive interface, that choice of rendering the brain transparently with clear highlights, there's an element of thoughtful design there, maybe even artistry, aimed at making the complex scientific information more aesthetically pleasing, clearer, and easier to absorb. It considers the user experience.
So it's not just raw data presented, it's a project that thinks about how the information is delivered and experienced by the learner.
Precisely. It seems to be about finding creative, tech-enabled ways to make dense scientific concepts approachable, engaging, and ultimately more memorable. Applying that blend of disciplines to the challenge of education.
Let's dig a bit deeper into those specific technologies and data sources mentioned. Beyond just noting 3.js, the source gives a few more details.
Right. For example, it mentions that the textual descriptions, those explanations that pop up alongside the highlighted brain regions when you select the semiology,
Yeah.
those were generated with assistance from OpenAI's GPT-4o model.
Ah, okay. So they used an AI model, a pretty advanced one, to help write the explanatory content.
Yes. And the source explains why they did that. They used GPT-4o specifically for its ability to synthesize complex neurological information and present it clearly, concisely, and in a user-friendly way.
So leveraging AI to boost clarity and accessibility, which ties back to their main goal.
Exactly. It's an interesting example of using AI not just for, say, data analysis, but actually to improve the communication and educational value of the tool itself, helping translate potentially technical medical jargon into language that students or the general public can more easily understand.
That's a really modern approach to creating educational content. Okay, what about the brain model itself?
We mentioned it's based on the Destrieux Atlas. The source adds a bit more detail, saying the model is derived from data that is compatible with the Destrieux et al. 2010 Atlas. This reference points to a specific publication, indicating they're aligning with a recognized, published standard for how the brain is partitioned.
So the map they're using is based on a specific documented scientific framework. It's not just arbitrary divisions.
Correct. It's grounded in a framework widely used in neuroimaging research. And the source is also quite explicit about acknowledging another key data source. They specifically mention and thank the resources available at brander.org.
Brander.org.
Yeah, they state that these resources were invaluable, particularly for actually obtaining the brain model data that they then adapted and used in Seizure Zone.
It's good they're transparent about where the foundational data came from,
Yeah,
giving credit where it's due.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Acknowledging the creators of the atlas and the providers of the data is standard good practice, even for educational tools. And, as we noted, the source reiterates that the visualization rendering the interactive part is done in real time using 3.js.
Right, that powerful JavaScript library for Web 3D.
Yeah, repeating that point just emphasizes the smooth interactive experience. Rotating, zooming, seeing things light up instantly is all thanks to this specific web technology working right in your browser.
So when you put it all together, Seizure Zone sounds like quite a sophisticated blend. It takes standardized anatomical data from recognized sources like atlases and brander.org.
Mm-hmm.
It processes potentially complex symptom descriptions, getting help from AI like GPT-4o to make them clear.
Yep.
And then it presents these visualized connections using powerful, accessible web tech like 3JS.
It really is a multidisciplinary effort, isn't it? Which fits that Bionic Chaos mission biology, technology, maybe art design perfectly. It shows how you can weave together different threads of data and technology to create something new for education.
Speaking of building and improving, that leads nicely into the sources section on acknowledgments, feedback, and future plans.
Yes, they start by reiterating their gratitude, specifically thanking the creators of the Destrieux Atlas and the people behind the brander.org resources, recognizing the foundational work their tool builds upon.
And they seem genuinely keen on getting input from users, right?
Very much so, based on the source text.
Yeah.
It states clearly that user experience and insights are seen as vital for the tool's ongoing development. There's an explicit commitment mentioned to making Seizure Zone as effective and user-friendly as they possibly can.
So they're actually asking for feedback.
Yes, the source says they warmly welcome feedback, suggestions for new features people might want, and of course, reports of any bugs or issues someone might encounter. They also express interest in hearing how people are using Seizure Zone in classrooms, for self-study, etc.
That makes sense. That feedback loop is crucial for making any educational tool better over time, isn't it? Understanding how it lands in the real world.
Definitely. It helps the developers refine it to actually meet the needs of the learners and educators using it. It kind of turns users into collaborators in the tool's evolution.
And do they mention specific plans for where the tool might go next?
They do. The source indicates they are continuously working on enhancing Seizure Zone. It specifically mentions plans to add more detailed regional information.
So drilling down even further, maybe within the Jerry and Sulci?
Potentially, yes,
Yeah.
getting more granular. And they also mention plans for incorporating additional interactive features, although it doesn't specify exactly what those might be in this text.
Okay, so it sounds like they view Seizure Zone not as a finished thing, but as a living project that they intend to keep improving, adding more detail and more ways to engage with it.
That's the impression the source gives, and this connects right back to you, the listener, or any user. Engaging with tools like this, providing that feedback, even just using it and perhaps uncovering areas for improvement that can directly shape its future development and make it even more useful down the line.
Okay, great. Let's try and pull all this together now for you, our listener. Why is spending time on a deep dive into something like Seizure Zone, as described in the source, particularly valuable if you're looking to, get up to speed on complex topics quickly but thoroughly without feeling totally overwhelmed?
Well, based on how the source presents it, Seizure Zone seems designed precisely for that purpose. It acts as a kind of shortcut, not by dumbing things down, but by slicing through the complexity of brain anatomy and how it correlates with symptoms, using that powerful tool. Visualization. It takes something incredibly intricate, the 3D structure of the brain, how specific symptoms might map onto it, and makes that connection direct, visual, and hopefully more intuitive.
And that visual element is the real game changer compared to just, say, reading a list, isn't it? It's one thing to read Temporal Lobe, it's another to actually see it light up when you explore déjà vu and lip smacking. It builds a kind of spatial understanding.
Exactly. It aims to make that abstract idea of brain localization tangible, immediate. And this is where that critical and fun aspect really shines, I think. It makes learning about the brain genuinely engaging, maybe even captivating, by highlighting these specific, sometimes quite surprising, connections.
Yeah, that déjà vu example keeps coming back because it's so concrete.
It is, it's specific, it's a bit unexpected, and seeing where it potentially maps in the brain just makes the information stick differently. It's designed to give you that aha moment, visually delivered.
It absolutely seems like a way to quickly gain solid, memorable knowledge about specific brain symptom relationships, which fits perfectly if you want to be well-informed efficiently. You could use it to look up symptoms you've heard about or are curious about and immediately see the potential anatomical link, according to the tools model.
hmm And beyond just the brain facts you might learn, it's also a fantastic case study in itself. It shows how these diverse modern elements, detailed anatomical data, advanced 3D web technology, sophisticated AI helping with clear communication, and a real focus on user experience are all being woven together.
To create entirely new ways to learn.
Yeah, new accessible ways to learn about complex biological systems like our own bodies.
Uh-huh.
It really demonstrates the potential for technology to make subjects that might seem daunting or intimidating much more approachable and interactive for everyone.
You can really picture spending time with a tool like this and developing a much stronger, more intuitive feel for brain geography and how different areas connect to different experiences than you might ever get from just staring at static 2D diagrams in a book.
It shifts learning from passive reception to active exploration. It's positioned as a tool for discovery.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive into the Seizure Zone tool, based purely on our source material, we've seen how this interactive platform, built on scientific atlases and powered by modern web tech and AI, aims to offer a unique visual pathway into the complex links between brain structure and neurological experiences.
It makes that connection, say, between a symptom profile like déjà vu and lip smacking and a specific spot like the temporal lobe tangible and hopefully much more understandable for learners.
Yeah.
We really try to highlight how functions and dysfunctions can be localized in the brain.
It's a clear example of trying to visually map clinical observations onto the underlying neuroanatomy, all for educational purposes. And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with, something to chew on after this discussion. We've explored how Seizure Zone helps visualize these specific, sometimes seemingly unrelated symptoms like déjà vu and lip smacking, potentially pointing to the exact same brain area, the temporal lobe in that case. This ability to map precise experiences to precise locations is only growing stronger with technology.
It is.
So, what does this increasing capacity to anatomically locate, to visualize the where of very specific, very personal thoughts, feelings, or actions as tools like Seizure Zone demonstrate is possible, at least conceptually? What does that tell us about the future potential for understanding and maybe, just maybe, one day influencing the most specific and personal aspects of our own internal lives? If a specific feeling like déjà vu or maybe even a complex emotional state has something like a visible zip code in the brain that we can pinpoint, what are the deeper implications for how we understand consciousness, identity, experience itself?
That's a profound question, isn't it? About mapping the material basis of our subjective reality. Lots to think about there.